My name is Ren, and the Executive Director of HomeWORD. And we're just really excited to be here, excited to be working with all of you over the next 2 days. I always say to folks in the community, the Charrettes are some of the best things that we do. It's a great opportunity for us to work with our neighborhoods and put the input that makes so much difference into the design and the end product of our projects. And I don't know if folks know some of the projects that we have around town. There's a storyboard here in the back that shows some pictures from some of our other developments. We've been really fortunate that we've gone through this design process before with other neighborhoods and really designed some really unique and wonderful projects in Missoula. So thank you so much, because really all of you are the most important part about the next 2 days. It's really your input and your ideas and your vision that really makes this process special and unique. So for the agenda, I just want to run through this really quick. I'm going to start off and talk a little bit about HomeWORD, how we got here, what the project is looking like in terms of, or what the process has been looking like, what we've heard from the neighbors to date. And then we're going to move into a resident panel where you're going to be able to hear from folks that live in some of our housing, folks in the community who might be potential residents, and hear about who we're designing for and what kind of housing we want to be thinking about from that perspective. Neighborhood comments. At that point, we'll take a break. We'll give an opportunity, take a little breather. If people want to stand up and share what they wrote on their red piece of paper, that'd be great. Or if you have other comments or additions, we've gathered some input from our door knocking campaign that we'll be sharing. If there's other things that you just feel like you've got to get out today, we'll get those up. Otherwise, tomorrow is really the day where we're going to kind of roll up our sleeves and do a lot of the hard work and the small group work. Then we're going to hear from Don MacArthur, who's with MMW Architects, and Don's put together a slideshow, and for me, this is one of the greatest things about our design charrettes, is it's really the only time we kind of force someone to put together lots and lots of pictures of development in Missoula or across the Northwest that's interesting, that we can model after. And one of our projects over here on Russell Street, Priory Court, there's this kind of nice internal wooner. Well, who in Missoula had ever heard of a wooner before? We'd never heard of a wooner. It means living street. And it came out of a slide that our slide presenter showed us from Boulder, Colorado. And it was this great way of having an internal courtyard, an internal street. And everyone, the next day, we had the slideshow on Friday night, and on Saturday, all the small groups said, "We love that slide of the wooner." And every single small group picked up that concept. So the slideshow is really a great time to kind of get some vision, get some ideas, have some visuals for the small group work tomorrow. And then we'll do some question and answer. If folks want to talk some about what they've seen or ask questions, we'll have a chance to do that. And then we'll kind of close it for today. So today is more of the presentations, and then tomorrow is the small group work. Tomorrow is when we all get together, we break into small groups. We'll start the afternoon talking about kind of the goals and givens of the project, have some chance for feedback, and then break into small groups and really sit down and try to work through some of the issues and solutions before us. Okay, so folks might say, well, what's the problem? Why are we developing all this affordable housing? I brought with me actually over there. Did folks see the Missoulian article in Sunday's newspaper? You want to see that? This is amazing to me. The Missoulian dedicated a huge section, 7 pages out of the A section, to talk about the housing crisis. And this is nothing new. We've been hearing about this. I've been with WORD for 11 years. We've been hearing about this for a long time. Rents have been going up. The community's been getting less and less affordable, and it was really amazing to see some of their statistics that they pulled together. They really talked a lot about home ownership and some of the charts about kind of who can and can't afford housing in our community. And I thought, boy, I thought we had it bad. Whitefish has it even worse. So we know that there's a big problem out there, and we know this from a lot of the statistics that you hear. We know that percentage of children in Missoula who are living in poverty has increased. It's actually doubled in the last 30 years. So that means folks are going hungry or don't have housing. We also know that, and this is this is something we all might feel, but the housing prices, wages are just not keeping up with the housing prices, so it's getting more and more unaffordable over time. We also know that 40% of our community is eligible for housing assistance, and that 45% of our community is cost-free. So we know that there's really a huge pressing need in our community, and I think we hear that when we talk with each other about what's happening in our community. When we have the conversations, and I talk to parents whose kids are off to college, and they say, you know, my kids will probably never be able to move back to Missoula because they won't be able to afford it. You know, so you hear that in the stories that we tell each other about our community. Or you hear folks saying, yeah, I really would have liked to take that job in Missoula, but I just couldn't afford the housing, so I took a job someplace else. So we hear these stories all the time in our community that really reflects the need that we have. We also know this from because we work directly with families in our community. Our residents, we work with a lot of single parents. We also have a lot of disabled and elderly folks that are on fixed incomes living in our units. We also, we do serve some couples and singles, but a lot of single parents really in our housing. And we see it when we look at who our residents are. They are food service workers in the community. They provide the child care and they provide nursing for our community. They're retail workers, they're office workers. There are a lot of folks that are working in all the establishments around town that we kind of take for granted. Our families, typically the broad range is folks make $5,000 to $29,000 a year, but the average is $8 to $10 an hour. So, if you think about an $8 to $10 an hour job in Missoula, that's not actually such a bad job to have. And these are folks that we serve in our housing. And it's also kind of interesting, folks always ask us about the whole car issue. I think because of our demographics and the folks that we serve, because we have a high number of single parents or disabled and folks on fixed income, most of our families, the majority of our families have one car. So, we see this with the stories that we hear from our families about how hard it is to make ends meet, how hard it is to help support their families. So what else do we know about Missoula? We know that growth is happening to us. If we think back over the last 10 years, we look around the community, we've seen the growth. We've seen what's happened out in the hillsides, and we know that it's going to continue to happen. It's a desirable place to live. That's why we're all here, and the growth is happening to us. And I know, for me, it's really astonishing when I look to the River Road neighborhood, and I see what's happened there, and talk with some of the River Road neighbors like Bill Comstock and others that are in that neighborhood, and you see what's happening in their neighborhoods, and you've seen the huge ballooning of growth. We know that growth is coming, and I think the question for us is, who are we going to be trying to be affordable to in our community? Who do we want to be living in our community? Who are we going to be able to serve? And what is our housing going to look like? How do we really get a handle on that? I know in my own neighborhood, which is this neighborhood, that a lot of what is happening might not be my favorite thing. So how do we get a handle on that to make sure that it's something that's of value to our neighborhoods and to our communities? And at HomeWORD, we think we do a pretty good job of that. We create a really good dialogue with our residents and our neighbors. We have been able to really produce really beautiful housing. We really invest in our housing. We put a lot of dollars in to make sure that we produce something that's going to last a long time and look really beautiful. So that's really our commitment. And we also have a really deep commitment to being in dialogue and making sure that all of you have input in what we do. So that's important to us, and I think we've been successful and can kind of prove that with a lot of our past projects, whether that be firewood. And we also understand that this neighborhood is different. We also understand that each of our neighborhoods is different. Gold dust works on the north side because it's the north side, and because it's the gold dust on the north side, it's not appropriate for the Grove Street neighborhood. And we know that when we talk with folks out in the neighborhood, and we've heard a lot from folks. We started a door knocking campaign about 3 months ago, and we actually went door to door to about 120 residences. A lot of you might be here today because we knocked on your door and asked you what you cared about. And some of the themes that we heard that we want to make sure get embedded into this process is that we heard concern the neighborhood is changing. So how do we address that? The neighborhood change is happening. It's coming out in the direction of Grove Street. How do we address those changes? Folks really like that they're close to the river. one of the things that we heard is one of the real values of the neighborhood is the beauty and the proximity to the river. Road maintenance, and this one I think came up over and over and over again. We kept hearing the concerns about Grove Street, around the county maintenance of the street. There was concerns in different ways about some of the increased traffic that's been happening on Grove. We've heard that a lot. We've also heard concerns that folks use Grove as a cut-through to get away from the 3rd Street and Reserve Street intersection. So we know that this is a big issue for the neighborhood. People are also really concerned about the vehicular speed. Speed cars! That a lot of folks are cutting through there and driving really fast, and that can feel really dangerous. And so a lot of folks also express concern for the safety. With that one, I'm going to cut over. I've also been really impressed, having been out there for the last couple months, of the amazing culture of walking. This is a neighborhood that walks. People are out on Grove Street all the time. So many of the neighbors we just met walking down the street. What are you doing knocking on our doors? People were really friendly and wanted to talk about why we were out there. So that's amazing. There's kind of this whole culture of people being out and about in the neighborhood. City-county issues. There's concern about the annexation and the growing annexation kind of happening, going out from Reserve Street, and connections to the sewer. For Grove Street, there is sewer kind of going down both roads, and I know that there's connectivity. We would, of course, be on the sewer producing our housing, but there is concern for other neighbors about what's going to happen with their sewer water, with their house. Do they need to hook up to the sewer? Will they lose their ability to have well water? That was a concern for a lot of the other residents. And concerns around density. Folks really like the semi-rural atmosphere that is happening out there. And I think we need to be really respectful of that and recognize what is it that makes a semi-rural character. And I hope that we get to see some slides and have some better understanding of that. And it's not going to look the same way it looks in my neighborhood and the numbered streets here, where you have sidewalks everywhere and street trees. It might look different. And so how do we really recognize and respect that semi-rural atmosphere? Some of the things we heard from that is people like gardens. A lot of good gardeners out there in the Garden City. People like having their horses and their open space, and so how do you build but still have respect for that semi-rural atmosphere? There's a lot of concern over the overcrowding of Hawthorne School. As a lot of folks may or may not know, depending on how involved you are, and I just got a copy of a citizens report. That's really interesting. I'll bring it with me tomorrow. Folks are going to take a look at that. There's such a huge growth of kids in the neighborhood, especially with all the development that happened in the River Road neighborhood. There's a citizens group that's come together to really put pressure on opening back up Emma Dickinson. And so we need to talk more about that. We can, but we know that it's kind of this dancing game that happens, right? Hawthorne is hugely overcrowded. Emma Dickinson was closed. Now you're seeing more families moving out into this neighborhood. That's going to put pressure to open up Emma Dickinson, which a lot of the school advocates are saying that's a good thing. We should open up Emma Dickinson and have both schools open and operating. So there's a real concern about that. And there's concerns, and this really grows more out of the River Road neighborhood. There's some concern about the cul-de-sacs, that these cul-de-sacs happen and they don't have through streets, so that it causes a traffic nightmare, and really, again, it changes, in some ways it really changes that semi-rural atmosphere to have cul-de-sacs happening. And that there's this great sense of neighborhood and community out there. There's the Orchard Home Life Club, and if it wasn't for those spring weddings, we'd be out there today. We could not book this entire month. But there is a sense of neighborhood and community, and people know each other. When we're walking down the street, folks said, "Hey, and have you talked to the Myers yet? And have you talked to Alan yet? And have you, So there's a sense of community out there. And there's also a real understanding that the neighborhood is affordable right now. That it is a place where people live because their housing is affordable. And so, how do we maintain that? One of the great things about the site that we have is, as you can see from the photo over here, is that we are our site here butts right up against the trail system, or the to be developed trail system. So you have the walkway underneath Reserve Street, and that comes across our property. So we know that that trail connection is really important. Again, I think part of that's because there's such a great cultural value. So how do we connect up to the trails, and how do we connect to the river and create something meaningful there for the whole community? And then there's this whole question of sidewalks. People go back and forth. Some folks really like sidewalks.
I don't know how many people you are in here are landowners in that particular area, but do you have any clue how much them damn sidewalks are going to cost us?
Yeah.
And now, while we got your attention, how many people here actually live down there at Grove Street? Raise your hand, please. That's it. And you're going to tell us how you're going to run this project. I think you're barking up the wrong tree. I'm not a bit happy with it, but I don't like having to pay for a bunch of daggone sidewalks.
Absolutely, and I think
they're absolutely going to cost me better than $20,000 to put the whole thing in.
Absolutely, and I think what we're trying to say is that there is a huge discussion out in the neighborhood about sidewalks, and for us the question is, within our site, do we have sidewalks or not? And again, to respect that semi-rural atmosphere, a lot of folks don't want sidewalks, and you're exactly right, sir. A lot of folks don't want sidewalks.
I
hear that.
have one question to ask you, because none of us here apparently know you. Us landowners dang sure don't know you. Where's your money coming from? Who's funding you? Who's backing you? There's money somewhere out there.
Right.
I've never heard who it comes from.
We're a nonprofit, and I'd be happy to share.
Well, yeah, but who gives you the money for your nonprofit is what I'm asking.
Yeah. So we get money.
I just want to know where it's coming from.
Okay. We get money from HUD, the Housing and Urban Development. It's federal money that's passed through the state. So it's passed through, and it's supported through the Board of Housing, Montana Board of Housing, and the
More
Department of
government
Commerce.
money?
I'm sorry?
More government money?
Yep, we have government money involved.
Do you get any private money?
Let's see, well, we get private money that supports HomeWORD in general. We have to rewrite foundation grants to support our activities, but develop directly into the project. We've also gotten support from Northwest Energy in some of our past projects, previously Montana Power, to help support some of the green building and sustainability of our project.
That's where my high power bill goes to help support something along my house I don't want. Kind of nonsensical on my part. I think I'll quit paying them.
Right.
I don't really appreciate having my bill paying you guys wages.
So it sounds like you have a lot of concerns. Are there things you want to add that you don't hear up here? Are there things that you'd like to add to our list of concerns that we've heard from the neighborhood?
Well, you know what you go on with this, but you should be a politician. Very good. Killing a half hour here.
Great. Well, sir, this is a great opportunity if you'd like to go ahead and throw out other concerns or ideas that you had out here about the project. Are there things? Are there pins?
We also have time for question and answer a little bit later too, which I think is part of the time we're thinking about pulling down people's concerns. So if you want to keep going now, and then we can swing back to that in a little bit.
Okay. But we do want to make sure that we have a chance to make sure that we have everything up here and have people's concerns on paper. All right. So we've been talking with folks in building the issues that are going to move into the conversation over the next day and a half, so we get a chance to really address those and talk through those and figure out what does that mean? What does that mean for the neighborhood? If you took one and said, okay, the neighborhood would like to see that connectivity from the trails to the river, how do we design them and how do we build that into the site planning and pieces like that? Okay. So lastly, just want to once again thanks folks for coming, and we're going to move over and talk. Betsy's going to be managing our resident panel, so if you want to talk and talk to her.
Yeah. So I'd like to invite Jesse and Susan and Deb to come on up. We invited some current residents and homeowners that have worked with us at HomeWORD to talk about their knowledge and experience with housing. And basically I'm just going to ask them to introduce themselves, and then I'll have a few follow-up questions to give us a general idea of what some folks like to see in housing. So introduce yourselves, tell us where you currently live, and what you like about your housing, and maybe what you don't like, if there's something that you don't like.
Hi, I'm Jessie Rose, and I currently live in the Lennox building, and that's one of WORD's projects that I think is quite amazing. It's a hotel that was renovated. It's on the corner of Broadway and Woody Ivy Street, and I'm sure that many of you have seen it. It was a gift to me to actually get located there. I used to live on Grove Street, right across from where your housing development is going to be, actually. And when I sold that property, because my life changed about 15 years ago, I moved on and went through the Southwest and had a lot of other life experiences. As I came back around and came back into Missoula, I didn't realize I had a serious medical issue. And so the last 2 years, I have really had to spend time kind of more personally, rather than like out and out in the community, attending to my own healing project versus being out and about. So one of the things that Word has offered me is a way of living in a lifestyle that is conducive to my own benefit, and eventually, I'm sure, to others. But frankly, having lived on like a variety of ways of being in the world, and being very able to take care of myself and my financial stuff prior to having a medical illness, I'm now on disability. And I'm telling you, it is like something I had never understood, how challenging that can be. So one of the things I think that Word has helped me with is coming into a very different kind of way of life, and yet maintaining a sense of dignity, maintaining a sense of who I am and getting to live among others, but not having to be so distraught and distressed. So, in a nutshell. Hi, everybody.
Hi, I'm Deborah Dury, and I came to HomeWORD almost exactly a year ago and went through their kind of schooling process, so to speak. I'm a single mom with 2 boys, and I got through school. I got a good job in Missoula, and my rent just continued to increase. And so I was lucky enough to buy a townhouse through HomeWORD. And actually my mortgage is less than my rent, which is really nice. So I have a 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath townhouse, and I have about a year into it right now. It's been really nice. My boys each have a room. I have a garage. I have backyard. I mean, it's been wonderful, and it's affordable. I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment and no storage, no backyard, no nothing. It was about $100 more in rent. So at least I have something that I'm putting into my future, my kids' future. And so I like the idea of having security and an investment, and hopefully, I figure I'll stay there about 5 years, and then maybe I can upgrade depending on how the housing continues to go around here.
I'm Susan Caldwell. I've been here in Missoula since 1986, came up here to go to school and loved it, and decided to stay and work, which the economy in 1989 with my college degree, I was cooking at Orange Street Food Farm, making your donuts, and then your deli items for lunch, again later in the day, and did a series of jobs around town. I'm very fortunate I've lived in the same place for 15 years. And it's a 3-bedroom house that my roommate has been buying from the bank. And we do shared living. So it's really very affordable, about $300 a month each. And it's a log cabin that's the next walk over. It's on Marshall, so very close to here. And I've worked a series of jobs. I'm now working at a bank. I'm an assistant to a mortgage lender, so I've been helping a lot of you refinance or dream about getting into a home. And so I'm buying a house, so now I'm going to do it as shared living, because my house payment is actually 2.5 times what my rent was. I went through the HomeWORD program too, and they were able to help me put the down payment together, because I'm very good at making payments, but saving up the down payment was being a big challenge. So I'm a shared living person, so I believe very strongly in affordable housing and want the bedrooms to be about $300 each. So we're in transition, just closed on the house about 6 weeks ago, and have friends helping me fix it up that live out the Bitterroot way but work in town, so they're about 45 miles each way out. So have friends that are staying and like bartering, fixing up. So
Great.
So, what would you include to design a house or apartment for a better house or apartment? From your experiences of looking at houses and picking the ones that you were able to buy or and living in the Lennox, what would you choose to make it a better apartment or a better house?
Well, I like the idea of, for me, for shared living, to have the bedroom, kind of have the community area, and so for us, we have like the living room and the bathroom separate the bedrooms. So it's really a feeling of, you all have your own house, even though there's 3 or 4 of us with multiple animals all in the same space. So design, I think, is very important in terms of having both private space and community space, and having yards, I really like, or some kind of community areas to be outside.
I'm going to pick up on that notion too, because also at the Lennox, I think that there can be an increase in the way we use our community space, because it's wonderful that you have your own distinct living area and kind of has everything that you need. But it's wonderful to have a way that you can also gather together that is very supported within that environment. And I think one of the things we need to upgrade is our community room, and also make that a way that we can somehow benefit from an interaction with the community. And I think that if you have a community room that's large enough and that there's enough support for, then you can have kind of an interaction with the community that is either educational programs or, you know, kind of shared experiences. And then the other thing I want is a health club at the bottom. I can get onto the trails, but need a weightlifting.
When I look at my home, since I have children, I like the open floor plan. I have my kitchen, my dining room, and my living room all real open, and so I can constantly see what they're doing. We have shared common area where, you know, I've really gotten to know my neighbors. All the kids go out and they play, but I also have my own little backyard, and I can do flowers with my kids and hang a bird feeder, and, you know, I have a little dog, and so she has her own little space to run around. I think that's really important, to have your own spot, and also to have room where you can get to know your neighbors. I think storage is important. I don't think having a bunch of crud all over the place makes your neighborhood look nice. I think if you know, there's storage units, or if there's a garage or something attached where people can kind of keep their stuff, put their stuff away, I think that keeps the neighborhood looking cleaner and nicer. And laundry is very important. I think it's very hard for people who are lower income, or if they have children, to get to a laundry facility. So maybe laundry on site or laundry within the units to make it a little bit easier for folks. And then transportation is always a big issue. A lot of folks can't afford vehicles, and so, you know, talking with the bus system, looking at what's the closest maybe bus route, the trails. I like the trail idea.
Great.
So.
Well, and I guess my final question would be, knowing that sometimes there's a stigma around affordable housing, are there any thoughts that you would like to share about this, about the concept of building affordable housing from your experiences?
I'm going to start. That's a fascinating question. I think we have a lot of stigmas, or a lot of perhaps judgments about what it means to be low income. And I think if we could kind of stretch our imagination and just think of an opportunity that you guys are creating, of how do we create community that really recognizes the value of each person, not because of a standard of living that is represented, or perhaps that they've met some kind of accomplishment, but that just for the virtue of being a human being, that we can find a way to be in compassionate resonance or relationship with one another. And I think this is one of the opportunities that Word practices over and over again in developing their sites is how do we talk about the hard things together? How do we talk about change? How do we talk about what might be viewed as a loss to some, and care that is difficult, for someone to make those changes, and then also look at the opportunities for somehow relating. This is a world practice issue. How do we communicate caringly and learn to live with one another? And it's the same thing we practice all over the world. This is like a little microcosm, and I see it as like a practice session that we can have tomorrow of how we dialogue and talk about those difficult changes and those opportunities. So one of the things I really have personally had the opportunity to explore is what does it mean to be low income, and what does that mean to me personally, and then what does it mean to how I see others in the world.
I guess when I look at low-income affordable housing, I think sometimes people think they're going to have just, there's a stigma around welfare and, people coming in and not taking care of things and a lot of that. And I work with folks with disabilities. I work with seniors, and I help them get back into the workforce. And I look at Missoula, and jobs out there are $6 an hour, and it's not that people in low income don't work hard. It's not that they don't want to take care of their things or their houses. A lot of folks that I work with are very proud of where they're living and the help that they get from HomeWORD, and they want to take care of their neighborhoods. So I don't want it to be where people think, oh, these people are coming in and they're going to trash our neighborhood and they're going to make it look terrible and the value is going to go down. It's not that at all. It's people who are trying to work hard and build a better life for themselves.
Hard to know where to go from where you guys are. I was raised in a middle-class family with professional parents and got a college degree. And really, rather than following where the money was for me, I chose Missoula because I like it here. And it's a quality of life issue for me. And I have friends all over that are working real hard from their 30s to their 60s, and someday they might retire here. And for me, it's like, well, I could have a career and do all this wealth building, or I could help my friends raise their kids. I've got a roommate that watches kids, and so we have a nice big open living room that's also been where these kids are being raised, and they get to grow tomatoes, and maybe in their apartment they don't get a chance to have their hands in dirt. So for me, it's all about it's having a life that I feel good about. And I never considered myself low income. I was raised pretty middle class, and I was in the top 10% of my graduating class and all that kind of stuff. And yet, to have the life I want, I work here and whatever jobs are available, and I guess I am low income. Surprise! I did not know. But it doesn't mean exactly what you guys do. Self-growth going on. It's all of us just doing the best we can and contributing how we contribute and making the best life we can for ourselves, our coworkers, our neighbors. Sure, it sounds a little bit political, like we should all sign up, but if we all cooperate, we can get I think we can all get most of what we want. Short of all of us getting to win the lottery, which probably isn't going to happen.
Well, I want to thank Jesse and Deb and Susan for coming down on Friday night to participate in this opening evening discussion on the Grove Street design charrette. So thank you very much for your thoughtful answers.
things that you wanted to add. And we started with a list of concerns and things that we heard from walking around the neighborhood and talking with a lot of neighbors. Want to kind of open the floor and hear from all of you if there's things that you want to add to this list or things that you're concerned about.
Be interesting because there's only 5 of us from the neighborhood. What are the rest of these people going to comment on? They don't live there.
How come the rest
And
of
by the
you
way,
can't
just a
come?
minute. By the way, was this a sales pitch for the new building you're going to build or what? Sounded like one to me.
Sir, I'm trying to create a dialogue here. And
Well, we have a
that takes
dialogue.
both
I
of
just
us.
asked you a simple question.
Yeah,
Was
we
it
don't have blueprints, we don't have a design, that's not how we work.
Okay.
So we don't actually come out here and say, here's what I want your comments on, and what do you think? We start from a process of this is where we start. We start
Yeah, I
from
know, and you're
a process of what
asking
we
for
want to
the
make sure
live
we
down
do. I'm sorry?
There's only 5 of us that live down there, and I'm just curious.
Right, and we've talked with about 8 neighbors, where we generated this list from talking with neighbors over the last 3 months. So are there things, sir, that you don't see up here? Because I mean, it sounds like you're really passionate. Is there something that...
Yeah, because they're next door to me, for God's sakes. Just 35 houses are going to be on my doorstep, which I live right next door to your piece of property.
Okay.
So I would be very skeptical, and so would you, because this may or may not reduce my property value, and I have a tendency to think it's going to reduce it.
Okay. Are you
Now,
on the...
does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Well, good. We understand each other.
So where are you at on our property? Maybe you can tell us.
On the south side,
You're
right
on the
there.
south side? Okay. So you're on one of the houses here on the south side?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know, I guess you got some map, but yeah, on the south side, right there on Grove Street.
Sir, do you own the whole trailer court on the south side?
Huh?
Do you own the entire trailer court on the south side?
Do I own what?
Do you own the entire property on the south side?
No, I think Larkin owns part of that.
Okay.
Then I know you would talk to Larkin because he's my next door neighbor.
Okay.
He owns the biggest chunk of that.
Okay. I just wasn't clear, if there was one ownership over there, folks individually own their trailers.
If you'd been around asking everybody, you would have found out there was one ownership or two.
Yeah, we did talk with folks in that area. Who drew it up there? Betsy, was that you or?
No, that was me and David. And we weren't asking people about their ownership of their property. We were talking to folks about what their concerns and thoughts are for the neighborhood and encouraging them to participate in this process.
Okay.
All right. Go for it.
So you're concerned about your property values?
Yeah. Yeah, how much is it that 35 and 4 acres, by the way?
Okay, so you're concerned about property values. A lot of our properties are actually much higher density. There's a lot of examples of much higher density than what we're proposing out at the site. So you might see across the way, a lot of the projects are at about 16 units per acre, and we'd be looking at more about 6 to 8 units per acre.
Didn't make your neighbors happy, did it?
What's that?
It didn't make your neighbors happy, did it?
Actually, we haven't had problems with our neighbors and other past projects there. So, is there other input? I know this might be stifling.
I'm concerned about the traffic because there's only one way to get out of there, and that's down Grove Street onto 3rd,
Okay.
and then to Reserve. You go the other way up River Road, you have to make a right-hand turn down Reserve.
Okay, because you can't get out left on River.
Right.
You can, but it's difficult.
Well, yeah, if there's no traffic coming in. 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe. And also, Julie and I just drove past the place on Russell Street. There's no playground. Where do the children play?
There's a swing set on the far side of the site.
A swing set?
Yeah.
How many children live there? As a former daycare provider, I'm concerned about the children living in those 35 units. Where are they going to play?
Okay.
The river is closed. Grove Street is going to be.
Yeah.
Nobody is.
Okay.
Where are the children going to play?
Okay. It's a great concern. Julie, were there other things that you wanted to?
Do you have an idea of what kind of structures you're going to put? Are you going to put individual units or apartments or townhouses?
Yeah, we're really open to that. So part of the dialogue over the next day and a half, when we started to envision Fireweed, when we broke into small groups, some folks said, maybe we have a whole apartment complex, and some folks that came up with this idea of the duplexes, and so that grew out of the design charrette, and folks sitting down and sketching and coming up with ideas. So that's part of what tomorrow is to come up with those ideas. And another thing that came out of the fireweed example of the fireweed charrette was the concern about the street frontage along First Street. How do we, follow kind of the patterning of First Street and respecting that street the same way that the neighboring buildings kind of face onto the street and have a sense of single-family homes. So each of those are duplexes, but they're kind of more in the scale of like a single-family home.
On the east side of Orange, on First?
Yeah, on the east side of Russell.
Russell.
Oh, Russell.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And then we would find another place. Is that word? It's over on First Street and Orange?
First and Orange, no?
Yeah,
it's just... Oh, north side. Yeah, and that's really, really high density.
Oh, that's on the north side.
Yeah, and Fireweed Court, to give you a sense, Fireweed Court, the one with the straw bale wall, that's at least twice as dense as the highest density we propose out here. So we'd either have twice as much green space, you'd have much bigger land as what you see out there, or you'd have half as many houses.
Okay, how many units do you have on the Russell line?
We have 12 over there.
12.
Yeah.
And there will be 35 on Grove Street?
Yeah, but we have, I think, what's the acreage over at Fireweed? We have 3/4 of an acre over at Fireweed, and we have 4.6 acres here. So it's a much bigger piece of property compared to like Fireweed. But that's a good visual to have if you think about Fireweed and think about the density out there.
Okay, how about the parking for the people, the residents living there?
Parking is a good one. There's lots of different strategies on parking, and maybe we'll see some of that in the slideshow too. What we've done at Fireweed is people have parking right next to their unit. And so the question always is, do you have a big parking lot, or do you actually disperse and have parking spaces right next to the unit? And we decided, because most of those houses are for single parents, that having the parking right next to your unit was really important. So that was a big...
What influenced you to go for a lower density project here as compared to Fireweed Court?
Trying to respect the neighborhood. So knowing that the neighborhood's been really concerned about maintaining that semi-rural feel, really looking at, it's a lower density site given what's around it. Just like Gold Dust is in a warehouse district on the north side, it's next to 3-story buildings, or across the street from 3-story buildings, so it was made more sense to have a 3-story building there. So a lot of it is really the context of the neighborhood and what's around it.
Kind of gets back to what kind of units, so say 35 units, and say that in the same breadth of lower density, it isn't lower density in terms of what that neighborhood is like. And I'm assuming that 35 units is to a certain extent cast already decided on, right?
We're going to be looking at the affordability. One of the things with 35 units is that's where we start to be able to have other amenities on the site. So that's really our goal. If folks are wanting, like play equipment and other things, you have to spread that out amongst the cost of each of the units. So yeah, we're looking in that 30 to 35 range.
Well, what's the square footage of these places?
That'll be, part of that'll be determined by
500, 1,000, 1,500, what?
Yeah.
Somebody must have a wild idea to guess out here.
Yeah. Don, do you want to address that?
There was an architect in here. Have at it.
Well, I think that part of it comes back from HomeWORD. I'll pass the buck back in a way because it will be to do with who residents are. Are they single parents with a couple kids? Are they families with 3 or 4 kids? Those are different size units. I imagine from our past experience with HomeWORD that we'll be doing a variety of different unit sizes from potentially small 350 square foot units to something that would accommodate a family that might be, 1,500 square feet or 1,500 square feet.
I think our average, what's Fireweed Court with those 3 bedrooms? Those are about just under 1,000 square feet?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry.
So those are like Fireweed Court are 2 and 3 bedrooms, and they're somewhere between 750 and 1,000 square feet for a family.
Now, are those, I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah.
Are those townhomes?
They're right here on Russell Street. And they might be a good, if folks want to drive by there on their way home, it's a great thing to look at. They are actually duplexes, but they look like a single family home, so they're really designed to kind of fit with the scale of the neighborhood, but they're actually duplexes, so they actually have 2 doorways off of them.
But you haven't decided yet whether these will be duplexes, a single family, or condominiums. That's still to be determined.
That's what we'll be doing tomorrow, is doing sketches and trying to figure out how it fits on the site. And a lot of that is, do people want to see it just spread out over the site, or do you want to see it kind of clustered together more that allows to have more green space? And those are the balances, as a developer, that we always have. And so part of doing the process of the neighborhood is to make sure that you all talk about what you care about as well.
Could you just explain what Charrette is?
Don, you want to talk more about tomorrow and how that goes?
Sure. Well, we've seen this sort of the beginning of the first part of the Charrette, the vision of the product, I guess. And part of what I'm going to show in the slideshow is some ideas to hopefully spur us for tomorrow. A bunch of slide images. A lot of them are of the Grove Street neighborhood, but some of them are of projects that we've done with HomeWORD before, and some of them are of places far away, and just showing some examples of what can be done. So that's part of where we're moving to for tomorrow's Charrette. And tomorrow's Charrette is where every one of you out there gets to put pencil to paper or gets to call out ideas, and we're going to have groups of probably 5 to 7 people with 1 or 2 people who are going to be documenting their thoughts in terms of both graphically and writing and making sure that everyone gets heard. So everyone here will get a chance to put out their ideas about all these questions, the questions that you're raising about what kind of housing, what are the units looking like? Are they small single family? Are they duplexes? Are they row houses? Is there one big structure? It's pretty open right now. And that's really the point of what we're doing right now, is to figure out which directions to go and try to make sure we're matching the vision. So with that, maybe I can, unless there's other thoughts before, I could go right into the slides I have, because I think it is, yeah.
This is an architecture that I have to put that in. There's a, not controversial, you have a little stand of trees towards the north part of the property on the road. Is that going to stay put?
Yeah, that's what folks are saying we really care
Oh,
about.
I also have a nice little stand.
Here you go. Let's put that on the list.
My son has a tree fort.
Keep the trees.
You'll see from the images that there's a lot that I saw as I went out there. That those trees are beautiful, and there's beautiful trees all up and down Grove Street. And there's a lot of great mature vegetation out there that we certainly, you'll see the things that caught my eye, but they're not necessarily the things that may be important to you, and that's you may be active in these images and saying, well, that isn't important to me. And that's part of what we need to hear from you guys is what do you see in your neighborhood?
Ren, can I ask you a question? Is the project entirely rental right now, or is there going to be some homeowners in combination, or?
Right now, we're envisioning that it would be all rental housing, and we're looking at having an equity building piece where folks could actually, part of their rent would actually go towards savings. Because one of the things we hear a lot is that folks that are in rental housing really have no opportunity, so how do you start to have folks save? There would be an opportunity if folks were really concerned about that, that we could actually do a few single-family homes along Grove Street, if that's what people are really wanting to see.
So, just a shot of the street, and the immediate things that caught my eye were the beautiful trees and vegetation, particularly lush out there right now, beautiful lilac trees. It smelled great. Some of the things that Ren was saying about the quality of walking out there. You walk out there and you see why, because it's beautiful to walk out there. The vegetation is great, and you feel like you're on a beautiful lane. Just kind of go through. This is a picture on the site looking to the east, Reserve Street, and a little underpass going under Reserve Street. Great views of the mountains surrounding. It's surprising how tranquil it is on the site when you're down there. It's down below Reserve Street. You see the passing cars up there, and there's some road noise from there, but it's really abated quite a bit by the wheel guards here that block off some of the sound, and and you still have the great views to the surrounding mountains. Just on the site, sort of the history of what the land, how the land's been used. There's obviously been livestock on the land and old fences, and you can see there's a series of power towers that run through the site, and we're kind of standing and looking about from the throat of that underpass, looking back to the west on the site. These are the grove of trees that he was referring to in the back. Some great old cottonwoods back in the up here on the site plan, and they certainly provide shade, and they provide a little bit of the history of the site there too. I'm sure they were planted around a structure or something. That's historically. And in those trees, that's maybe the first residence right up there. So there's a little tree house up there. That's it there. And looking to the south, this just shows the edge down here, and great horses and small-scale fences, and there's some fabulous gardens over here too that show that people are really working on their land there. Then the other edge, the edge up along Reserve Street, this was in the middle of the day, maybe 2:30 in the afternoon, and sure enough, it was backed up all the way from our site down to Reserve Street. It's kind of amazing. Reserve Street has really had a big change, a big impact on the site, and it's not just the widening of Reserve to 4 lanes, it's also the sewer that has come out both under Reserve Street and under Grove Street, and I think that Ren talked about it, and obviously the neighbors have talked about it, about this being a neighborhood that's in change, in transition, and hopefully the goal out of this whole charrette will be to make that transition, model a way for that transition to be a really positive thing. Model a way to do a project that is served by the sewer and has the density that the sewer supports, that still is something that the neighborhood feels really positive about. Ren talked about the trail system potential. This is looking through the underpass back through onto the property, and the current plan is to work with Parks, the trail, I don't know what the right name is, Parks Department, I guess, to develop trail system through there. And then on the other side of the site, this is actually standing on Grove, and so there's the underpass, there's the railroad right of way, and that railroad right of way right about here is this gate. And it's, that's the future access maybe to the river past that gate. So that was, quick tour of the site and the surroundings. The next thing I wanted to talk about, I just walked up and down Grove Street and took some photographs of some of the houses and kinds of structures that are out there. I was really struck by some of the wonderful small-scale houses that are there, and there's quite a number of these. And they're all set back off Grove Street. They're addressing Grove Street, the little front porches facing Grove, and big mature trees that separated, although a few of them have died or been cut down. Here's another one. This one's actually not on Grove, but it also has great old lilacs around it. Another one, some big conifers. Great little porch addressing Grove Street, beautiful with fences and concrete and big maple trees in the front. Here's an example of the newer development. And this, I'm not sure I know the names of each of these subdivisions, but this one was recently done, I think, by Shelter West. And it shows that partly it's different because it's not as old. It's only been there for a few years rather than 70 or 80 years. But there's also differences.
3 years.
3 years.
3 years, that's where I lived, just beyond that.
Right, 3 years.
I lived there for 3 years, and mine was the first house.
Yeah. And, the trees haven't gotten a chance to grow up and nestle in yet. So there's that, and there's it's just a question of some other things that are features that I call everyone's attention to. This is the sidewalk and the curb and gutter, and it's what the city requires. with subdivision. So those are the standards, and they're part of what's required, but they don't necessarily match with the vision of Grove Street. So just putting those out. Not all the buildings out there. Obviously, there's a lot of outbuildings, and a place that's been used in an agrarian way. There are lots of other small structures that are being used in association with the farm, or you can see the hay and obviously barn doors and whatnot. Some garages, maybe a little apartment above it. Again, nestled back off the street through the dense vegetation. There's another beautiful one set back in there and using some old siding. And a lot of the images that I've taken are of the older places, but there's a lot of nicely maintained and beautiful single-family residences along here. So kind of jumping to the other side of town into very different things. These are some shots of the projects that we've done with HomeWORD previously. And to give you a sense, not that these are the kinds of things that we would work towards on your site, but to try to show you how these things were a response to Charrette's just like this one. This is the building that we developed here, the Gold Dust, and there are some an old warehouse building, the grocery warehouse, I think it's called, and the Stensrud building here, and a series of buildings that actually face the railroad over here. This is set in the historic railroad district, and we tried to pick up the size of the buildings that are around that, pick up some of the kinds of detailing that the railroad buildings use, brackets and metal siding, and some of that to make a really beautiful place. This building is a fabulous building, the Stensrud building, and we tried to pick up some of the same massing of it with the Gold Dust as we walk down the street, and to create a really beautiful street along here. Again, this is urban kinds of design, not Grove Street, but some of the same ideas can translate through. This is a small little building in the back of that same development. We're standing actually on a roof garden. There was a question about where kids play, and one of the things that we really tried to do, even in high-density developments, is to find places for kids to play. They may sometimes have to be on a roof in order to find enough space when it's urban. So we're up on a space that is open. And there's another shot that shows the front and shows the trees that were planted just recently. This is a shot of the courtyard in the back behind the building, and it shows that there are 3 small buildings that are along an alley, and these buildings were designed to try to address the backside of the alley. There are a whole series of small little accessory dwelling units, if you will, back there, and we tried to pick up the scale of those and be sensitive to those as well as to the front side of the street. This is an interior of one of those apartments to give you a sense of the quality of what we try to create for people who live in these. And we try to use durable and nice materials and make it a place that people will really value and think this is a place that's worth taking care of and caring for. Another interior, that's a little living room spot. Another project that we worked on was with HomeWORD was the Lenox Flats, and this is a historic preservation project, and a lot of the mission there is to try to look at what's there and understand what's powerful about it and what's beautiful about it and make it better. At the end of the day, this project is now on the National Register of Historic Places, and we added some elements. These porches here are all brand new, and they actually mimic where they were. There were originally porches about in these locations, and we recreated them and tore out a bunch of old aluminum siding and windows that was in that area. And we added new. Wonder who's sneaking up on you. We added new steps and new railings that were trying to match historic style. And there's some real similarities about working in a historic preservation with working in a neighborhood that has a lot of beauty.
Can you even just set down these displays?
Okay. This is Fireweed Court, and that's come up quite a bit. There were some questions about where do kids play in Fireweed Court, and one of the answers is that kids love to play out on hard surface areas sometimes, and we tried to make the little lane to access driving so slow speed and so carefully designed that kids would feel comfortable playing out there. And every time I go out there, there are parents sitting on their little stoops and kids riding their big wheels or their tricycles around in the area that's created by the lunar. So these are the kind of cars we should all drive. Some of the other things that we tried to do, there were beautiful apricot trees on this site, and we went way out of our way to not cut any of them down. You can see the road kind of curves around, and it was a nip and tuck whether that was going to survive, but it's survived beautifully. And it gives a sense of part of what we're trying to create is both a integration with the neighborhoods that it's in, but also beautiful interior spaces that create community within the development. Just a detailed shot of the front porch. And a little closer up of the kids playing out there. And I think Ren mentioned about the way that we use these duplex structures, which are fairly small, to blend in with the structures that are across the street. We're about in scale with them, so that it looks like it's all part of the original fabric of the neighborhood. So, rapidly jumping around town. I thought that it would be good to look at a few other examples of how people have developed structures kind of out at the perimeter of Missoula a bit, or at edges of Missoula. And I would consider this site to be certainly the edge of Reserve Street here and kind of the city-county edge. So this was one that occurred to me. This is Brookside out up the Rattlesnake, and it has certainly a different population of people who live there, but it is still an interesting thing to look at how the buildings sit in the landscape and how they've used native vegetation and landscaping to tie together the housing. They've used a lot of, you can't see it in this particular slide, but they've used natural materials to try to be in concert with the land there. Roof forms are kind of continuous throughout, and they've used the water feature, which is trying to link this development to the river, which is maybe about as far away from this parcel as the river is from the Grove Street parcel. Some other elements on that site. This is Brookside still, and just showing how little pathways can be developed hard surface, but they don't necessarily have to look urban. A little paved pathway, and again some ponderosas or some other fairly native vegetation. This is a project down on Parsons Street, which is right by Madison Street Bridge, and it has kind of a similar relationship to Madison and the busy traffic as our site does. It'd be sort of analogous to being right about there. And this shows higher density. It's all attached. All these dwelling units are attached, but there's a nice big green buffer space around the perimeter of it that kind of you hardly even know it's there. Many people who haven't been down this particular street don't even know this is right along one of the busiest places in town.
It's right near Kiwanis, too.
Right near Kiwanis Park. So it's on the river. Yeah, it's similar in that way too.
Very, very expensive.
Yeah.
Saw that.
So more images of that same place showing little private outdoor spaces for each person, and then there's a bigger public green space out here. Parking, I can't go back to these, but I should talk about parking on those. Both Brookside has parking right at its unit. You pull into your garage, and it's very much a kind of a private place where you just go in and you pull into your unit. The one on Parsons there's one central lot in the perimeter of the site, and you walk to your house. You can't pull right up to it. So there's different attitudes about that. This is a bad slide of a project in Bellingham, Washington. And this actually is a 5.8 acre site, and there's 32 houses on it. Each one of these houses 2 residences in it, and they managed to put all of the houses onto about 3 acres. So 2.8 acres were left, and they formed gardens and green space and obviously sunflower growing territory. This is another kind of a vision. This is north of Seattle, and these are little cottage, kind of a bungalow court, I'd call it. And these are very tiny little houses. Each one of these can be no bigger than 600 square feet on the footprint, and 950 or so all told. And each one of the houses fronts on a green space, beautiful green space, and they have nice porches that look out over it. And they're set. This is about 14 units per acre, and it has green buffer all around the perimeter that protects it from the neighborhood, and it has a large parking area that is actually at the perimeter of the site. You walk to your house. It's a similar conception also by the same architectural team from the Northwest. This one's down near Portland. It's about 15 units an acre. These actually have, you drive right to them, although it's difficult to tell. I think that's a garage door right there. And it's much more in the fireweed court vernacular of a little tiny lane leading into the residence. This is actually a complete residence right here in this small building for a single person. And each one of these is individually owned. Quite expensive. This is another different kind of a vision. This is in Bainbridge Island. This is also about 30 or so units on 5 acres, and it's difficult to tell it, but these are connected from here, and then there's a separate building over here, and there's on the other side there's similar buildings that kind of enclose this pedestrian street, if you will. And then there's quite a large buffering around the perimeter of the site of green space and a place for kids to play. And again, parking is at the perimeter. This is another project in I think it's just north of Seattle. This one has a difference. It's actually 2 large structures on a site with parking at the perimeter again, and just showing some architecture and working into existing vegetation. This project is in California, and it shows, I think, it sort of centers around a green space. It has a courtyard in the middle, a place for kids to play, and a whole series of townhouse-style units around the perimeter with some flats in them. And parking is at the perimeter again, and some of it is actually underneath these units. This is affordable housing, and it's about 16 units an acre. This is another project in California called The Farm, and they tried to use some architectural elements of, that are called to mind farm architecture, double-hung windows and clapboard siding, and preserving mature vegetation and doing quite a good landscaping treatment. This is also 16 units an acre. This is the backside of the same project, and part of the reason I have this slide in is to show that there's ways to bring some rural feel to higher density through use of things like split rail fences and the vegetation that you select. Coming back off of fences, this is on Grove Street, and just wanted to go back and sort of look at some of the elements that are important. We've looked a lot at buildings, and we've looked at a little bit at some of the ways that sites can be organized, or talked about how sites can be organized with one large building with parking at the perimeter, or a series of small buildings with parking at them. But some of the elements that are really very powerful about giving us cues as to what kind of an environment we're in, whether it's rural or urban, are elements like these kinds of fences. This is not a fence that you would find in the city. This is a rural fence and beautiful old trees. Another fence along Grove Street, stacked up rocks with a wire cage and rails, white rails. This is out actually, again, going across town. This is Brookside in the background, but showing, an old livestock kind of fence with barbed wire and posts, and then an old row of trees that march along behind it. So these are kind of elements that could suggest a rural character independent of what the buildings are behind them to a degree. Again, out the rattlesnake, this great stone wall that they just stacked up out there. And a memory, this is the vineyard that's been purchased out there, and I don't know exactly how many acres it is. I think it's about 60 acres or so. And it's certainly one of the ways that the rattlesnake, I think, is hoping to preserve its rural character. Is right across the street from where I'm standing is Cornerstone Development, which is I don't know exactly how dense it is, but it's certainly suburban development. But it has this great view that's going to be preserved by the virtue of that parcel being preserved as an agrarian piece. Some more elements to look at about fences in this case, but a great old cross fence and the sort of texture of the grass. This is also of the rattlesnake and the white picket look and great stone in the older trees. This is, as I was driving up and down the rattlesnake, I realized that this might be, the concerns about Grove Street are have a lot to do with traffic and how that's going to affect what it's like. Certainly, I don't think anyone would ever anticipate that there would be the same traffic on Grove as there is on Rattlesnake, but you can certainly see those same houses along Rattlesnake Drive that are using those same buffers to try to protect themselves a little bit from here. Some other elements that call out the neighborhood to me. This is along Grove Street, beautiful sort of the individuality of the place. Each person has their own mailbox. You look at the newer subdivisions, and each mailbox, they're in panels, and they don't kind of give people that same sense of individuality that these mailboxes do. This is on the site. It's, I guess, just to recall the history, the barbed wire, the use of the site over time, the age of the site. Obviously, it's been farmed for a long time, and it's had a lot of different things happen on it. And we certainly want to take those into account and think about them as we think about how to develop the site. This is on the site as well. Maybe showing a little bit of weeds, but it has a certain beauty to it too.
No, that's my neighbor's house.
And these are the trees on the site, and the great cottonwood and the thick gnarled bark and the sort of remnants of barbed wire that are along the base of them. Just a couple of notes to end with. This was, I walked under the underpass, which is back over here somewhere, and came out into one of the new developments, and these two contractors had pulled up onto the highest knob they could find for their trucks to park them. And parking is a big influence on the site, and I guess how much do we give to the car is something that we should be thinking about as we go through this exercise tomorrow. And are they given prime real estate, or are we? How do we deal with it? So that was just to sort of remind me of that. And this was another thing to bring us back to Reserve Street and the impacts of Reserve Street. And then one more shot on Grove, beautiful weeping willows and a small little structure just tucked in under it. And certainly that's a great rural image of this little tiny building just being nestled in under there and barely having an impact. So I guess I'm I don't know if I should get into the question and answer part if that's still up. I'd certainly love to hear any thoughts or questions about some of the images that I may have shown right here, and I can try to talk about them or answer other questions that might be out there.
Go ahead.
Good.
I was wondering about that firework court development. I've never actually been in it, and I've been interested to go in it, but I don't know the protocol, you know? Is there a way that, is that supposed to be a public, like, can you walk down between those houses and just knock on someone's door if you feel like it, or is it a private area?
I mean, that's a good question, and actually I can say a few things off of it, and Ren may want to, I see her coming up to maybe answer that, but the way that when we designed it, we thought of it as it's kind of in between. You know, we want it to feel safe for the residents who are there, feel safe for the kids playing out on that street. There's a actual entry to that project. There are gate posts, and those gate posts, when you're coming up to it, you recognize it. You're not quite sure, should I be able to go in there or not? And that's part of what we want to create is a sense of internal community there, and the feeling that, yes, that is a little bit private once you cross over that line. Certainly, I'm sure that Ren can manage to get you to walk through there, or tell you what the protocol is if there's someone that you could talk to there to actually do it.
You're talking about fireweed or gold dust?
Fireweed.
Yeah, I think that was an interesting conversation that we had in the design charrette leading up to fireweed, which is because the focus there was really single parent with more kids, more of the units were 3 bedrooms, because of the point that's what the need was in the community. Now the need is actually more for 1s and 2 bedrooms. And so we talked about how do we deal with safety, and so we have some low-level lighting in there to make sure people felt safe, going from their car to their homes, and trying to create some sense of private space, but at the same time that it has, it's also a little bit of open space. We actually have a whole neighborhood of kids that come over and play on the Winter, and actually a couple of the parents do childcare out of their homes and things like that. So there is actually, with the kids, there is some connectivity back in with the neighborhood and firemen.
Do crews come in and maintain the landscaping on this project?
Yeah, so I'd love to address that. One of the things, there was a concern about, well, what's going to happen to my property values. I think one of the things that's nice, when we were talking with some of the neighbors at the Wagners, who live not on Grove, but off a side street of Grove, they were saying, well, we've been having problems, and a house 2 doors down from us, they're renting it out, and they're having all these parties and keeping us up. And the nice thing about working with HomeWORD as one of your neighbors is that actually you can call us, and we can actually deal with the issues happening with residents. So we can actually be a go-between. We actually have a professional property management company that deals. We have maintenance folks that deal with all the maintenance. We work on a whole capital needs assessment. So we actually have a whole schedule of what needs to be replaced to make sure that we maintain them for the long term. So I think we're actually a really good neighbor that way, and that we keep up our property. We deal with problems if problems arise, and there's definitely a place to go if you have an issue or a problem with the property. And I think with the trail system, that's going to be really interesting, and the different aspect of this project, which is we are going to have a lot more thoroughfare through our site. And so how do we create an amenity, because there is more land, how do we create more of an amenity for the neighborhood? So thinking about what some of those are would be great.
I have a question I should ask earlier about the process. My name is Bill Constantine. I don't live in the area, but I live east of Reserve Street. And we have gotten screwed by high-density development there, excuse me. So I can come up with a little bit background in this, but I don't live in those two areas. What is the process that you see going forward from here after tomorrow? Will that be our last chance to say anything about it, or how's that going to go?
So what we do is tomorrow we do the small group work, and we get the small groups to really brainstorm and come up with good ideas, and then we actually take that back into the neighborhood. So we'll actually be coming back out into the neighborhood, having some community meetings, getting feedback. What do folks like? What do you not like? And we've done that with each of our projects, where we've actually then been back in the site, and hopefully we can get Orchard Homes
I think maybe what he's asking, is this approved by the county? Because everybody else has to put up a sign that says proposed subdivision. I've never seen one out there. And how did you get it approved?
That's because we're on the very front end. We're not coming in and saying we're doing this to your neighborhood and it's a done deal. What we're saying is we're working with the neighborhood and then we would,
You're
and
sure
then,
acting like it's a done deal.
and then we would go, well, we are developing the site, but what we're developing is not a done deal. So we would work with the neighborhood and try to come to some decision about the site, and then we go through the public
Okay,
process.
then why do you people go out there and tell all these homeowners out here that it was a done deal? Like, who was that told them?
No, what the Wagoners asked us, are you going to definitely build? And we said, yes, we are going to definitely build. We are building a project out on Grove Street, what it looks like and all of that stuff.
But you still haven't got approved for a subdivision yet. Through the county commissioners.
Yeah, there has been no approval from the county for a subdivision. There's a question, if it's all rental units, it actually wouldn't be a subdivision.
Well, wait a minute, if you're selling 35 units, it's something.
Well, it is something, yes.
I mean, there's double speak.
I think he's just trying to actually clarify that it's something else. It's called like a plan unit development. It actually has a different zoning term. I don't think you're trying to be tricky. I think you're a specific guy.
It'll go through the process that it needs to go through. The county's going to review this, and that will certainly be public process. I mean, it'll be going through, no doubt, planning board and county commission. In other past developments, I think we've, like the Gold Dust, I think we presented to the neighborhood council no less than about 3 times during the process to answer your question. And I think that is part of the commitment that HomeWORD is making, is that we're going to come out and show you what's happening every step of the way. You'll have plenty of chance to comment on how we interpreted what you gave us to start from tomorrow. And that's really what we're trying to get tomorrow is some ideas, a whole list of ideas. Some of them may not be all working toward one idea, they may be contradictory.
And I'm at a loss here. I'm at a loss here because there's only a couple of us landowners and these people are going to do the deal. Now, somewhere along the line, I'm missing something here.
Sir, I think that a lot of folks in this,
where are these people coming from? Where do you people live?
Could you talk about the invitation?
I mean, you're all going to be up here doing what this is going to look like, but where do you live at? I don't understand, because apparently none of you live down the right.
So we've done an extensive outreach process to try to get folks here. We've been doing, turnouts and been doing door knocking. We have folks here. We have some folks that are living over right across the street on Reserve Street, living in what's called the River Road neighborhood. We have folks that are living over here on the numbered streets. We have folks that I don't know all of who else is here. We have some folks from the plant from OPG that are here to kind of observe the process.
Run it by me, what the heck's an OPG?
I'm sorry, Office of Planning and Grants. The planning office. So some folks from the planning office are here as well. And then we have some facilitators and some of the residents from over. And I think everyone's voices is important here. And I know that everyone here has good ideas. Everyone here is going to be able to bring forward.
Okay, one more question. Down a piece of property on, you guys going to put up about an 8-foot high fence between mine and yours because I don't want the grass clippings inside the horse kids getting over there and all the other nonsense.
Okay, so that's a great thing to throw up on our list. You're
already had problems with kids live blocks away from it.
Okay, we'll be sure to get that up here.
Yeah.
Where, with the parks that has the bike trail that comes on the inside, do you have anything allotted for that? Is that going to run the south side there, or how's it going?
Well, this is where it comes out from under the underpass, and where it runs through the site is a little bit up in the air, although ultimately it needs to go back over there.
So that would more or less borderline our property.
Potentially, I mean, this is up for discussion tomorrow that it could potentially, make a loop through the site. So that's part of what we're trying to get is feedback about what makes sense to do there and how that should go.
When we built, we had to leave a certain space right by the river. And our building had to be back so far from that space. And I was wondering, is this just for what do I want to say? Is this just for mothers and children, or is it for families, husbands and wives and families as well?
Yeah, our projects are for families.
Because you keep saying a mother with children, but you don't say anything about the father being there.
We have single dads. Actually, it's interesting, Gold Dust, it just turns out kind of who applies for our housing. So Fireweed, we've had more single moms. Gold Dust, we've actually had more single dads, and we also have 2-parent families in both of those projects as well. Linux, we have more elderly folks, people who are on fixed incomes, and then we also have single people who live in Linux. So each of our projects is a little bit different.
Well, now, what is going to be the price of either the property, the townhouse or the condo? What price range are you planning on being in?
Yeah, I'm assuming that we would be similar to the Gold Dust, which would be in that $300 to $700 a month. Yeah.
And then what would be the price if they wanted to buy it?
Well, right now, the main part of the development is a rental development. And so the only possibility for home ownership would be if we wanted to put a few single-family homes on the front, and we'd have to figure out if we could do that with zoning, and those kind of rules.
I see.
With some of the zoning pieces.
What you had discussed, I think, in some of the preliminary stuff that was sent out, which we were considering at least, with some of the rental properties, people in some fashion being given an option to buy into these. That being a possibility.
Yeah. Given the funding source on the property, what we're imagining is that folks would actually be able to start saving on their homes, so we would actually put aside some of the rent. One of the things we hear from renters, kind of what Susan was saying, is I never had the opportunity to really save for that down payment. So we would actually take some of the rent, whether that was $25 a month or however much that was, and set it aside in a savings account for the family who lived there. So there'd be kind of a savings plan. Now with our funding, the funky thing, and we don't break these rules, but the way that our HUD funding comes down is that they have to stay rental for the first 15 years, and then they can convert.
The income criteria is vary from project to project?
It's pretty much that it could vary a little bit in terms of the lower end, but on the high end, we always serve folks below 50% of the median income, which is in that $8 to $10 an hour range.
You said, just hopping around here a little bit, the meeting tomorrow is you kind of get a blueprint that is a very flexible blueprint. And then you go back, and I am in the neighborhood, and you go back with that to the neighbors and say, what do you think, what might change? And that opportunity exists at that point. Because I'm not going to I'm very interested in this, but I'm not going to be there tomorrow. But I want to have a look, I'd like to be in a group that gets to see it with some modifications still possible. One thing I might say to those who are, I was struck by that. I think the slideshow was great. And one thing I was struck by in that is in trying to keep this neighborhood, keep the nature of the neighborhood the same. This cries out for not having a bunch of parking right along Grove Street, because that would be so contrary to everything else that's out there. All the cars, even in the back of the property, are going to be out on Reserve Street. But I think if anything, that's what jumped out at me. And on a more general note, you see oftentimes you're talking about zoning, you see a sign go up, subdivision proposed, there's a meeting held, pop, out come the tractors. What you guys are doing is wonderful, because, to me it's unique, because this type of input opportunity is not something that normally happens when a piece of property gets purchased for development. So I really appreciate this.
Thanks. I appreciate that. It is different, and it's hard to get used to. And I know, we're all used to going and working with developers and saying, how do we stop exactly what you're doing? And we don't like this, and it is a really different thing to get used to think that, wow, we actually are trying to shape what it would look like and having that input.
So this sounds like a very long process. And when do you think you would be
starting construction? The very earliest that we would start construction would be next spring, and probably like a year from now. That would be very fast for us. We're slow. So we're slow moving, so it might not be until next fall. Yeah. So we'll be working with the neighborhood over the next 4 to 5 months.
Okay.
So there's a lot of time to give input, and so this isn't the only time. We've talked to the neighbors. We've been trying to reach as many people as we could, which we knew was door knocking and talking and trying to get that input. The design check, this is a more intensive engagement for folks to be involved with, and then I think the really important thing is then coming back to the neighborhood. And I just also want to say that everyone here has valuable input. I think we need to listen to what we're hearing, and then we're all coming together to create. So I want to make sure we're not kind of shutting off that opportunity for other folks in the room to feel like they have a voice or that they have something important to say or have good ideas. We're really trying to design with what we've heard from the neighborhood in mind. So we're trying to use this as criteria, and then really appreciating all the volunteer labor in this room to come up with some good ideas about how to address these kinds of issues.
You're going to be on the city sewer, but what about water?
We're going to be on city water too.
You will have city water?
Yeah, that would be one of the mandates of the project, would definitely be to not influence other people's wells. We hear that people really like their well water. Let's do that.
About dropping the water level down.
Yeah, that would be a really big thing.
I don't think you can here.
Great. Well, if there's not other things, I'll let Betsy go ahead and wrap this up. And I know this might be a little bit of a challenging format. We've heard a lot. We have a lot of ideas out there. We've heard some good feedback. I appreciate some of the dialogue that's happened. We've gotten to see some slides. And please come back tomorrow and join us and do some of that good work with us.
So before I make some closing comments, I would like to just invite people to look back at these little red cards that we handed out at the very beginning that ask for what you wish for, what you believe in, or what do you remember. And if anybody would be willing to share, this would be a great time to share what you wrote, or just drop it off before you leave so that we can collect them and see them.
So I just want to welcome everyone for joining us again this morning. After last night, we talked a little bit at the end of the evening and realized that one of the things that we weren't very clear about, maybe because it's just second nature for some of us, is to talk a little bit about the process that we're going to be going through and what is the design shred and what is the process, because it's really different than the process a lot of developers go through. And partly, quite frankly, that's because as a nonprofit, we have more luxury of time to be able to really engage in a neighborhood process. So for us, we started this process with the organizing piece where we went out and talked with our neighbors. We knocked on about 120 doors, talked with about 80 of our neighbors, and tried to gather a lot of that information that we talked about yesterday, which is up here on the wall, to make sure that a lot of the concerns from the neighborhood came forward into the process, because we knew that not 80 folks from the neighborhood would come out, but we knew that we could capture some of the feelings and issues that were sitting out there in the neighborhood. From there, we have moved into the Charrette process, and quite different than a lot of community meetings around development, this is really laid out where we actually don't have ideas on paper. We don't have a plan. We don't have blueprints. We're not asking for kind of a checkoff from the neighborhood. We're actually doing the design in a group process. So the design charrette, last night, typically what we've done is that our Friday night is more of the visioning process where we have an opportunity to talk about kind of what we've heard from the neighborhood, give folks a little bit of a sense of who our clients are, who we work with, to understand who we're designing for. And then we try to give some sense of vision. So the slideshow that Don did last night was really trying to give some sense of what are other design solutions that we've seen in the region or in our own community. Folks, chance to come in. Welcome, welcome. Hi. So after the design charrette, we're just running through and talking a little bit about the process because we realized we weren't totally clear last night about what the steps are that we're moving through. So last night was more of sharing some of the vision, and then today we're going to be breaking folks up into small groups. And in those small groups, you see lots of pens and paper. We have 2 facilitators in each group that are going to help to address some specific issues. We're going to start in the morning by talking about the neighborhood. We're going to first ask a couple of neighborhood residents from the River Road area who've been really engaged, thinking about their neighborhood over the last couple years, thinking about what it means to be living in a semi-rural place, thinking about what those values are and trying to share with us to have that deeper understanding of what semi-rural means to the neighborhood. And then we're going to break in, do the small group brainstorm that's going to be looking at creating brainstorming and really throwing out every idea you might have, whether that's, I don't know what, underground housing, I don't know what you might think of, but anything is possible. And trying to give some graphical representation about what could be important in the neighborhood, trying to look at this list and think about how to respond to some of the issues that came up. And try to think of a list of some of the positive things that could happen on the site, or some of the things, some of the values, or some of the pieces that could go into the larger vision. Then we're going to come back into a large group, share what those findings were, and try to come up with some synthesis of the values, some of the pieces that would be important for us to take into the afternoon. We'll have a break for lunch, and then we're going to come back and talk more specifically about the site, where we're actually going to look directly at the site. There's pictures up here. You can see our site is kind of this funny, I don't know what you call it. Not polygon. Trapezoid, I think. Trapezoid. That'd be trapezoid. All right. So this is our site. If you look to the south, this is where the gentleman who was talking last night, Mr. Day, this is where he lives. He's unfortunately not able to join us again today. This is a trailer court down here that you can see here. Mixed within the trailer court, you'll see horses. It still has a really semi-rural feel down to this side of the neighborhood. Looking here, you can look into our site. Here's a stand of trees here, so you can get some visuals for that. And here's Alan's house to the north. This is kind of one big house complex here to the north of us. So we just wanted to give you a few more visuals of the site. And in the afternoon, we're going to really do more graphic responses that address some of the specific issues that we heard coming up when we talked with the neighbors and some of the things we heard from last night, talking about how we address these different issues. What do we have on Grove Street? We heard a neighbor say, we don't want parking all along Grove Street, so how do we address this edge? How do we address reserve? We have this kind of nasty edge over here, and how do we deal with the pollution and the cars and the noise? How do we address this kind of nice complex to the north of us? How are we respectful to this neighborhood? How do we address the issues of the folks in the trailer park? I know that Mr. Day was concerned about kids and horses, and so how do we address the kids and horses issue? Or how do we address, he had said, well, you're going to build a fence along my property, and so how do we address those separations? We're going to also talk about the types of buildings. Some folks are saying, well, what are you building? And we're going to try to get into small groups and talk about what makes the most sense and have you all brainstorm and try different things out and see what it looks like. What folks were asking yesterday, how do you put 35 units on the site? We'll start playing around with it in small groups and see how that starts to look and see what that might look like. So there's a whole series of questions that the groups will be working through. And then at the very end of that, we'll talk a little bit more about the units. We hear a lot from our single parents. We heard it from the panel last night that having an open floor plan is really desirable. Being able to see your kids if you're a parent is really important. So we want to think about that. And also be thinking if we have some of the units that work for seniors or people who might have mobility impairment. What are the things, I know that we've typically put our disabled units more in the action so that if you're sitting looking out a window, you can feel part of a community. So just trying to address some of those things and coming back in the synthesis. So that's our process for today, and then our process really needs to go back into the neighborhood, share our ideas, and everyone here has valuable ideas. I think that's really important to say. After last night, that I look around, we do have a few neighbors, but we also have folks who might own property or folks who might have lived in Grove. We have folks that live in River Road that have similar design challenges in their neighborhood. So we do have a range of expertise, and I think what makes the process a good process is going to be to go back in, talk with the neighbors, take the design back out. We had some good ideas. If you have ideas about how to take the information back to the neighborhood, one woman made a great suggestion here to maybe we take out a model and we roll it through the neighborhood and try to engage people to come out of their homes and and see the project. So then there's kind of a give and take back with the neighborhood to make sure, did we hear them well? Did we respond to the needs and try to get more feedback? And then we go into the standard public process, right? So I'm just trying to give people a sense of that, to have an understanding, because I think we didn't do a good job of that last night, that we're really in this pre-development stage that's going to take us this timeline to go through, and then we're going to hit the public process in the typical development stage, which typically all happens in a public realm. So we're trying to do the good work leading up to that public realm to make sure that we're really addressing the needs and wishes of the community. And what I want to say about that is that what's happened in the River Road, and talking with some of the River Road neighborhood, is that development kind of happened to them. That they're sitting there, and I know it's also happening with Franklin and the Fort. Development came out, it's happened, and it's happened in a way that folks are not very happy about. And they felt like they, in some ways, didn't have a voice in what happened. We have an opportunity, working with the Grove Street neighbors, not only to affect our own property, but to also try to translate those values for other developers in the area. Let's face it, there's other land, developable land out there that is up for sale. So development is starting to creep west, come across Reserve, and how can we, through this process, give something tangible to developers that might not have the time we have to go through this process. So we can take the time, but we can also translate that for other developers to say, here's the values, and the neighborhood is clear about their values and clear about what they want to see. So I think it's broader than just us. It's really for the larger neighborhood, and it's trying to set the stage for the developers. Okay, I also want to explain about the camera guy. Last night, people were probably like, who is the camera guy? And we're really thankful to have Craig here. Craig is from NCAT, our local television station, and Craig is going to actually be playing this back on TV. So that's another way to get it onto TV, and folks might not be able to get out to these meetings, be able to see the proceedings and be engaged in the process that way as well. So we thank MCAT for being here. Okay, so that's what we're doing. The first thing we wanted to do was to ask, spend 5 to 10 minutes and talk about semi-rural. We're going to ask some neighbors from the River Road area to come forward and share some of their thoughts about semi-rural, and also to ask you all. I see in the group other folks, we all have ideas about what semi-rural is. I know Kay lives out west of Reserve. I know Lee lives over in the River Road neighborhood. I know there's other folks that value that semi-rural feel, and let's just talk about that so that moves us into our design phase. And Don, I'm going to ask you to help facilitate that.
Nice segue.
So, Bill, would you be willing to talk a little bit about the neighborhood, the process that you went through? And Eric, I don't know if you'd be willing. I know you guys are both in the leadership of the River Road. Would you guys be willing to stand up here and just talk about some of those values that you see as semi-rural? Because you guys have really gone through that process for your neighborhood, and not trying to say that River Road neighbors feel the exact same way Grove Street neighbors do, but I think that there's probably some commonality.
Sure.
So you can go on.
Well, I think one of our issues has been traffic, and how do you calm some of the traffic, and how do you create like this? If you look at it, it has maybe one way in and one way out. How do you try to find another way in and out so you don't have the potential of 70 cars coming to one spot and then trying to get out? You kind of lose, I think, the rural feeling when you've got 70 cars at an intersection trying to get in and out of a development. So that's one of the big issues that we've been working with in our group, because there's lots of cul-de-sacs. And I don't think there doesn't seem to be any real easy answers, but that's one of our issues. Think anything else?
Continuing to eat over there, maybe I could I could fill the gap a little bit, because I think that this actually goes into what we're going to ask you guys to do right off the bat, the first group, which is really working off of what Ren had written up as a list last night about some of the items that the neighborhood have already raised as issues. And we're hoping for you all to add to that, not only from the neighborhood concern, but also from the community as a whole, and kind of looking at what are the issues in this area, and what could we see as a vision. And I think that the real important part is that transformation, the positive transformation. I think that the River Road folks may feel like, definitely feel like their neighborhood has gone through a transformation. And has it been positive? I don't think that too many people think that it has. And I think we'd like to model how to do this in a neighborhood, and do it so people do feel 5 years from now like there was a positive transformation that occurred with the sewer coming into play, with the expansion of Missoula. So this is really one of our big goals, and certainly the goal of the first piece of what we're doing today is to try to think about that and think about how we can make this not just acknowledging that it will be a transformation, but figuring out how to craft that transformation into something that can be positive. Bill, do you want to say a few words too about?
My name is Bill Comstock, and I live on River Road between Reserve and Russell, and in an old farmhouse on an acre of ground out there. I really appreciate both what Ren and Don talked about in terms of making this a positive process for the neighborhood and a positive impact on the neighborhood. And I've seen these folks work before on other developments, and I take that to heart. I know they mean it, and I know that's what they're going to do. And I think for the neighbors, that's really important. I spoke to some of you personally last night and said, there's a chance you're going to get developed, and you're not going to like it. And this is a real opportunity. So I see it as a real opportunity for our neighborhood, which I consider part of the neighborhood West Reserve. It's the Orchard Homes, the old original Orchard Homes neighborhood. So history is fundamental here. Orchard Homes neighborhood is an important historical component of Missoula. I have a list of all the original owners of the Orchard Homes tract going back to 1905, and it reads like a who's who of the history of Missoula. There was a deep philosophical concept based in a social movement at the turn of the century called the Arts and Crafts Movement that drove the concept of the Orchard Homes development. And agriculture, small-scale agriculture, was at the core of it. And the residents in this area have continued that tradition up until now. So one of the really core values that we feel in our neighborhood is open, green agricultural, horticultural space. Small gardens, small livestock, green space, lilac hedges. A lot of this was discussed last night. That's a real core value in there, is the open space. Another core value that we feel in our neighborhood, east of Reserve, is the diversity. The diversity of the lots, the diversity of the building types, not just the homes, but the building types, outbuildings. You saw some of that in Don's slideshow last night, a lot of that. I'm going to advocate in the groups today that diversity in structure and building type and layout be fundamental in thinking about this thing. Open space, talking about open space, gardens, agriculture, talks to me about clustering, that clustering should be fundamental here. We see a certain amount of asymmetry and irregularity in the design and development of our neighborhood. I think that could be replicated in a new project like this. It's not linear, it's not rectilinear. Another fundamental value that we've experienced in the east of Reserve area is the impacts of that. And this project needs to be very sensitive both about the immediate impacts of development during the construction of the project itself, and this involves inconveniences to adjoining property owners and other property owners in the area, as well as the long-term impacts of development that Eric mentioned, such as traffic mitigation has got to be crucial in the planning process. Another component of that is access to and availability to neighborhood services. Where are these folks going to go to get a loaf of bread? Are they going to have to go out and try to get out onto Reserve and drive out to this huge congested mess? Is there something this development can bring into the neighborhood to help bring small-scale services into the neighborhood? I think that's an interest that we see over in our area. But again, I guess the main point that I want to make that we've thought a lot about east of Reserve is the historical agricultural character. And I'm certainly coming into this process believing that we can do that here through clustering and through respecting green, thinking about green and how to do green in a clustered environment. So that's really all I've got to say.
Could you say, just add a few words, because I know that as you've been working through the River Road infrastructure plan, that there's been some discussion about a term that you've coined, I don't know if you personally, but your group has coined, green infrastructure, which is, as I understand it, a concept to unify the neighborhood and to preserve some of the values that you're talking about by using the elements that are sort of common to the neighborhood and making those elements be rural feeling or supportive of that semi-rural feeling. And the ones that I can think of off the top of my head are character of roads, character of pathways, preserving mature vegetation, preserving the historical housing types and actual houses, and maybe some other.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling attention to that. I've been talking around that, but didn't use that terminology. Green infrastructure, as we refer to it in the other side of River Road, is the unifying theme of trying to preserve the historical character of Orchard Homes at the same time allowing it to grow with the city. And Don really mentioned a lot of the components, but one of them is water. Here in Missoula, particularly in Orchard Homes, we have this 100-year tradition of storing water in the soil within our tracts of Orchard Homes through the irrigation ditch. The irrigation ditch serves as a corridor of greening for wildlife, for human activities. So the irrigation ditches are another example of green infrastructure as it ties together a semi-rural neighborhood. Open space for public facilities, parks, and I hate to use the word parks because parks generally has an urban connotation. I'm not talking about an urban situation here, but shared open green spaces are a component of green infrastructure. So really what we're doing in our planning process east of Reserve is green infrastructure is fundamental in all components of the types of services and capabilities that bring together neighborhood are tied together with this concept of green infrastructure in terms of vegetation. Another thing is privacy, I want to mention. Open space and privacy is valued in the semi-rural environment. And privacy is supported by green infrastructure in terms of hedgerows, mature stands of trees, and so forth. So that can be accommodated in green infrastructure. So I think mostly Don is pretty well characterized, and I appreciate that. It's a fundamental idea that we've worked out in our planning process in the River Road area, east of Reserve.
And I think it's a concept that's been sort of, as I understand it, it's a result of this development that's occurred because of the sewer and because of the drive of the city to add density. It's getting to be that 4 or 5 units per acre in that area, and in an attempt to preserve what you're thinking is important, this green infrastructure is a concept. And I think it has some applicability for what might be starting to happen out on Grove Street area.
what individuals? You almost could apply it to everything, you know?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, really,
Well, let's do
everything.
it. People.
Building types, people. Uses. And we got that multi-use.
Mixed use.
Yeah, transportation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Each group will present their ideas for a few minutes here. Hopefully we'll get through, there's a lot of information, but we'll try to get through in about 15 minutes, all the presentations, and then Ren and I will try to see if we can pull some common themes together, and I'll give you a few instructions before lunch, and then we'll eat a quick lunch and start on the afternoon.
Okay, so we decided that notion of green infrastructure in the Garden City was an overarching thing that we want to see, that we feel that would represent this project well. And we talked about how important the rural aspects are, living with nature, community with life, balance with nature, conscience. I missed that part of the discussion. And we also said diversity is very important, and that will manifest itself in transportation system and architecture and with the individuals that reside in the neighborhood. Energy efficient concepts are important here, preserving green space and alternative systems of parking and building.
We kind of started off, I think I'm the only one, well, actually, Colin, you're in target range, and I live in the neighborhood kind of nearby Grove Street. I'm at 7th and Hyberta. We kind of started off talking about the character of the neighborhood. And I talked a little bit about what were some of my personal core values living in that neighborhood. And we were talking about maintaining the character of the houses, the architectural character of the houses that exist in the neighborhood, and try to maintain that in new development. We also talked a lot about the agriculture, the rivers, and trying to maintain that in this particular development and how it connects to the rest of the community. And we were talking about having lots of green and open space on the outer edges of the development itself. And with the trail system coming across Reserve, underneath Reserve actually, and stopping at Grove, we were thinking how that's going to become a main thoroughfare for kids that are on the opposite side of Reserve that are going to be going to Hawthorne School. So it's going to increase traffic through there. So we're thinking of creative ways that might be helpful for the environment there and the neighbors that are there to bridge that what could be potentially a problem. So basically, we were talking about having lots of foliage, going back to some of the like lilacs and willows and apple trees that are already in the neighborhood that would surround the trail system.
But I did want to start off by recognizing that we have the great honor of Connie and Julie in our group. So we started off our discussion with, where are all our neighbors from Grove Street, and how can we get more people involved? Since Connie and Julie had talked to people, it seemed like folks really just didn't understand what this was about and felt like it was already a done deal. And so thinking of ways that we could actually get their involvement to continue this discussion, and they suggest we have an Orchard Homes night, maybe not on the weekend, and because we can't get into Orchard Homes because of all the weddings, but we could do it on a weekday night and just kind of continue this discussion so that folks can start to understand that we really do want to get some of their input. But with that said, we then talked about what they really, when they describe their neighborhood, what do they say to people when they explain what Grove Street is like. And so semi-rural, and what does semi-rural mean? Well, there's livestock.
first group certainly led off with the green infrastructure idea, but I think there were elements of that kind of going through each of the groups about preserving pieces of particularly the preservation part, preserving pieces of what's there now that everyone likes, the beautiful trees, some of the housing, the diversity of housing, and certainly the character of the streets and the character of the rural nature, the casualness that Andy mentioned, the horses and kids on the street. I think there's a sort of a feeling that my understanding of green infrastructure is trying to get at, and I don't mean to put a term on it that somehow categorizes it, because I think every one of the ideas that's up here is important to keep in our minds rather than trying to lump it into something that doesn't fully contain everything. But just to draw some themes out of it, one of the other themes that I thought about was the sort of privacy. There's kind of a contradiction here between the public, the community, public and community sort of realm, and privacy and property ownership kind of realm. And I think that's essential in all developments to think about that issue. And I think in the rural setting, what exactly does that mean? Does it mean, the casualness again, big setbacks were mentioned, buffers, light pollution? These are things that I think are to do with, preserving people's private rights, and yet there's still the thoughts about people walking down the streets and creating a beautiful realm for people to be together and to know their neighbors in that kind of a way. So I think that's one of our challenges going forward, is to try to do both those things at once. And the green infrastructure, the preservation part is easy to think. To put a challenge out there, we're not talking preservation right now. We're talking development. We're recognizing that there is going to be development in the neighborhood. So how do we develop some standards? How do we develop things that we can use? And this is going to be your challenge in the afternoon. How do we take some of these ideas and make them into an idea for development? And not simply say we like what there is now, but we like what there is now, and here's how we can take that and develop with it. And I did have, the diversity idea came up a lot, and I think that's very powerful, and we have a challenge here, because here we are developing one 5-acre parcel. We're going to do it all at once, and it's not going to look like it was built over time, but we still can develop diversity in there, and I think that that's something that I heard a lot, is that we'd like to see, lots of different people, different kinds of families accommodated, and we'll hear more about it this afternoon, I think, but just thinking that the housing might be different, and there might be small houses and big houses and different sort of, different characters out there. So those were some of the ideas that I had. Do you have things, Rand, that you wanted to add?
Well, it seemed like there was some consensus around how we face Grove Street. Last night we heard about preserving some of the old trees along Grove, and we also heard that theme continuing with how we really try to set back and create the open space, so that the open space really is kind of given back to the neighborhood by being that entry. And I was thinking about it as someone was saying, the long drives and that sense of privacy and the hedgerows and things like that. So I think you hit on the privacy element as well. And I think some of that challenge then comes around the path, which is then more like the semi-private or really much more public. How do you then engage that public space through the site with that private element? So it'll be interesting to see that balance. And I want to make sure that folks get a chance to respond to what you heard from other groups. So if you were listening or had a comment, I know Bill had a comment about the second group. Do you want to share what you were thinking?
Yeah, right from the beginning, I would, item number 2 under neighborhood there, this word infill has gotten to be a catchword in this community with many extremely negative connotations, and I'm really not sure that it is going to help in this process at all using that word ever.
So Bill, actually, the context of that, as Kay was saying, we come from a crowded environment. We believe in infill,
but we moved out to, so that doesn't really fit into the neighborhood.
right.
That
I
was
mean,
just taking notes.
we all know what we're talking here, and we need to know we're talking doing high density in a semi-rural neighborhood, density that is not currently consistent. Now, that may be accomplishing certain social goals within this community that many of us agree with. But I'm telling you, this word infill is explosive in this community. And I just don't think it's helpful using that word or using that concept in this process. And I'm not saying we're trying to hide anything, trying to get away with anything. We're doing huge density in an area that doesn't look like this. But throwing the word infill around, I just want to recommend asking this group for consensus to not be throwing that particular word.
Yeah, I think we do want to avoid being, pigeonholing this project by calling it any particular thing. I think our goal is to do wonderful community and neighborhood responsive design, always. I mean, and that I think is, I'd be happy to be pigeonholed under that. Yeah.
Dale? Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dale McCormick, and I work in the planning office. And one of the things that really struck me about what the groups are saying is that there's a subdivision on the other side of Reserve Street, the Village at Family Park, and the characteristics of that are in many respects very urban, and I'm really struck by the interest in having a more informal, more casual, less hard-edged kind of environment, but with a density that may, in the end, be kind of similar, but with a very different character. And I just find that really intriguing to have these two, if there's a way that there would be a complementary relationship between those two developments, one being more urban and one being more rural. And I'm excited by all of the idea, the sort of identifying what the character is that makes it rural, like paths, maybe not always having curbs and gutters and the infrastructure that we're used to seeing in the city. And I think because it's in the county, that there may be an opportunity for exploring that. So, observation.
Just to follow up on that, I think that one of the opportunities here for that sort of thing is the fact that you aren't going to be forced into individual lots and curbs and gutters and sidewalks. You can have a lot more flexibility in where you put the cars and what you do in terms of trails and what you do in terms of road width, things like that. You're not going to be boxed in like you are when you're doing a subdivision. So I think the opportunity to do something, as you said, complementary and quite different is here.
Great. I had two things that I wanted to talk about before I talked about what we're going to do this afternoon. The first was, I think there was one other comment that came up a few times, which was energy efficiency. And we didn't really stress that last night, but that is certainly one of the main goals of this project as we get into the building design, is to think about how to build buildings sustainably and energy efficiently. And JP Gordon is here from Northwest Energy, and he's actually been a partner on some of our other projects, and just wanted to let folks know that that's been one of the goals that HomeWORD has had and that we've helped to implement on a couple of previous projects. And certainly, we may not get there today, but it's certainly a big goal for us.
Anyone know if we have wind capacity on Grove Street? Is it windy up there?
The other thing was, a couple of people have asked about transportation. We talked about transportation and calming and access to the site and trying to not have cul-de-sacs and some of those sorts of things. I have had some conversation with Public Works, County Public Works, who's in charge of Grove Street essentially at this point. And they don't have a lot of things to tell us right now. I mean, I think we need to make some proposals and suggestions and go to them and see what their thoughts are. I did ask them about the intersections at Reserve Street and the intersection at 3rd Street, and if there were any plans to make changes to those intersections. I was talking with Clint Harris, and he wasn't aware of any imminent plans for those intersections. We talked a little bit about, could we limit the right turn off of Reserve Street onto River in order to stop the cut-throughs, and he, you know, it was hard for him to say without sort of looking at a big picture. So I think as people go forward and try to think about what would be specific design moves that could be done in the afternoon, you know, I think we should keep our slate open. Don't get limited by something that may or may not be possible. Let's just say, let's put it out there and see what happens with it.
And maybe we actually engage back with the street around traffic calming, since we're going to have an impact in the neighborhood. Maybe there's a way that traffic calming can be a part of our development and be integrated into our development, and that it would be a way that we could add benefit back to the neighborhood, since that's one of the biggest concerns that we've heard. And you know, I don't know that it could be developed, but maybe it's beautifully landscaped roundabout that could cut into our property, or maybe it's some other option. So think big picture about traffic calming.
So instructions for the afternoon. Each group will have several of these maps that they can have access to, and our hope is that you do the same kind of written information on these sheets, or on these sheets if it's more convenient to do so. We want to get as much graphic information as you can put down. So we're hoping that you'd also be sketching on top of this. It could be little sketches on the side. It doesn't necessarily have to be, in fact, we're not even encouraging people to think of it in terms of trying to develop a plan for the whole development. We're encouraging people to think of it in a series of small steps, to think about sort of starting from the perimeter of the site and working down to the more specific. We've asked for you to address 5 specific questions. The first question is, how should the project respond to the edges of the site? By the edges of the site, I mean very specifically, the north, single property owner up here, the west, Grove Street edge, the south with the trailer court, and the east with Reserve Street and the trails. So specific sort of notes and graphic information about what's appropriate. Should we be buffering off Grove Street? Should we be parking along Reserve Street? Should be, not maybe exactly like that, but just a reaction to what each of those edges means and how this development maybe should respond to those. So that's relatively quick. The biggest part is bullet item 2, which says what types of building and what kind of layout on the site is appropriate. This is getting to the questions about, are there large buildings in the middle of the site with big green areas around it? Are there a series of tiny buildings on the site interspersed? What kind of character do those buildings have? Are they bungalow buildings? Are they farm buildings? Are they modern buildings? Are they underground buildings? Are they, what are they? And not that we're asking you to design the whole thing, but just ideas, quick ideas. And that's the biggest piece. And this is partly the way that when we take on these projects, this is the kind of way we think about it. We try to break it down a little bit, and it makes it easier for us to start getting a handle on the issues and figure out which ones actually are the critical issues for the design to really inform how it's going to be. The third point was design of roads and trails, and a lot of these points that have been brought up are already starting to get at these issues. Roads and trails within the site, we know that there's a link between here and here that wants to be made. That's a given. And how does that get worked into the project? How do the rest of the roads and trails that serve parking inside the site and get access to the buildings? What's the character of those? And I think we've seen a lot of talk about that already, but if we can define those in graphic form, that would be helpful. Talk about narrow, and if that's the goal, narrow, tree-lined, or whatever it is. And then parking. How should the parking be handled on the site? Should it be large parking lots? Should it be small parking lots? Should it be, I think there was a comment last night about keeping the parking well off of Grove Street to make sure that it doesn't just have a big impact on the character of Grove. So some response to how parking should be handled on site. And the final of the 5 specific questions is, what should the landscaping and other elements of design and character be? And those are, in the slides I showed pictures of fences and mailboxes and smaller scale elements. It could be landscape treatment for the whole site. It could be, I guess it's just acknowledging that we're not just designing buildings here, we're also designing a whole environment that includes landscape elements. And that's going to be a big part of the rural feel, because the landscape and the growing things are a big part of rural life.
Don, do you mind just pointing out where the irrigation ditches are in the neighborhood relative to our?
There's an irrigation ditch on the north side of our property, and there's an irrigation line in a pipe that runs along this side. And you guys, someone may be able to help me more. Those are the ones that I noticed specifically. I know there's some other ones that are up here, but I couldn't point out exactly where they are.
Does it actually on our property?
It borders our property.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's a small, it's a 1 to 2 foot ditch there. It's not a very huge one. Beth?
Just a couple things. If you could say something about the elevation of the property, I think that would be helpful to folks in terms of the restrictions on, especially reserves here. I mean, that would help folks get a sense of, that haven't been out on the site, what we're looking at.
I'm not quite sure.
Well, I mean, just the fact that
reserve is elevated.
Yeah, and that there's portions of that property that are not exactly developable.
So the parcel is pretty flat in general. There's a little bit of material that has been excavated at some point in here, but I don't think that should inform the design. I mean, we can fill that in and don't worry about that. I think that essentially the parcel should be thought of as being flat. There's a pretty good berm that goes up along mainly this part of Reserve Street bank, and I would say that it's maybe 15 feet elevated above our site or thereabouts. This is an existing sidewalk that goes along Reserve Street and probably rarely gets used up here because it's right on Reserve Street. This part of it is actually quite nice, and it's nice until it goes back up to Reserve over here again. So that's another part of the trail. This dash line indicates the railroad right-of-way, and this indicates the power poles, and those are probably an element that will be in. We're not going to be able to afford to move those power lines, so not that you should worry about them too much, but they are pretty fixed elements.
And I would just say, you had said that the trail has to start here and end here. I understand that it needs to go here because it needs to go to the bridge, but I mean, if someone wanted it to go across and through, it could do that. So I don't want people to feel limited. It has to be directly in a straight line. It could actually be through the site.
So, and then at the end of those were 5 pretty specific questions that we want you to respond to. We want to give you some time to throw out other thoughts or spend more time on those questions at the end of it. So that whole piece is, I believe, about 90 minutes worth of time. And we're scheduled to start at 12:15, but I think we should push that back to, I don't know, I'm thinking.
Let's see. I mean, we have lunch here. So what time is it now?
It's 12 o'clock. How about in about?
Are people hungry now, or do people want to break in and keep working?
Let's eat lunch.
Those who are hungry. Not counting the pregnant woman. Okay, well, let's go ahead and break, and then we'll come back together. Sure.
I think that we need to answer this now for one. In terms of the bulleted items here and the sequence of events, you guys have encouraged us to think big here. I'm really trying to do that. I'm a little bit concerned that your sequence really limits our ability to think big. For example, we're going to implement a lot of these goals that have been stated here. Another concept would be that landscaping and other elements of design should come first in our process today, and then we should place structures within that. Again, you said place the structures first and then think of landscaping. I mean, that's an approach.
And, I guess that's a good clarification, because these are not to be taken like,
In that order.
these are not to be taken like they're supposed to layer this project up into one solution. Each one of these items is a separate idea, and they may not all work together.
Okay.
I mean,
So
so
this
you-
isn't sort of a sequence that we're supposed to do?
I mean, it's a suggested structure, but really each one of these questions is completely separate from the other.
With a different map for each
You could use a different map, you could use a different